You are up, Commissioner.
All right, Bannock County Commissioners are back in session, and the goal of today's meeting is to talk about master planning for the road and bridge area. And the way I see it, we have basically three things we want to accomplish in this meeting today. Number one is to decide on a final direction. We had some plans presented last week that I think were fantastic and were good, so just need to kind of ratify that. Number two hinges on which direction we're going to travel, what we're going to do financially, should we choose to go forward. And then number three will be some timelines so everybody can kind of be on the same page and traveling down that same path. So based on what we had talked about last week, Hal had provided with a couple of maps, and I think the map that everybody agreed on was putting Torrey up in the northeast corner, and then road and bridge would stay where they are, add on to the west side of the shop.
Yes.
We tear out all the stuff along the road, along South Fifth, turn that into parking, and move some of the stuff, some of that storage up onto the shelf, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So is everybody agreed that that is the direction we would like to travel?
Yes.
That's the plan. That's the plan, everybody.
Okay. So based on that, Hal had given us some preliminary numbers, and again, we're so very early in the concept. I just want to use those numbers as discussion numbers. I don't want to put a lot of stock in them. I know Hal's put a lot of work into them, but that was that was Dan's big concern, is given all the construction stuff he's been in the last couple of months, he said, how firm are we with those numbers? And I said, we're just going to use them as a springboard for now. And
those numbers are low based upon the fact that we would potentially be construction manager. If not, those numbers need to go up.
correct. And
Depending on Dan's schedule and what workload he can handle.
Correct. So just using those numbers is nothing more than a springboard for discussion and a placeholder to kind of say, okay, financially, how do we look at this? How do we kind of plan this out? And so I gave Christy this a little bit yesterday. I don't know if you had time to kind of come up with some ideas or thoughts, or you want to just start blasting out whatever we think we want to try and do and see if
We'll just
it.
have to, I mean, it's gotta come from reserves. We can pay the storage area is easy, we can take that out of road and bridge reserves. This 3.5 million, if I had a breakdown between road and bridge and planning, and well, the other functions, then we could break that up, or we could just use general fund, assuming they're sufficient. Tori's part, we've already got 300 budgeted. If, depending on timeline, we would either roll that forward, use some of it this year, and then finish it off. And then the furnishings, depending on the timing of that, would be potentially reserves again. The only concern I have is who would do the demo. I'm not sure that fits within the road and bridge function, if that was the intent. So we might need to add budget authority for that.
Okay. Our original, when we started this discussion last year, I thought we kind of talked about this being like a 3-year process to save up or whatever. Based on what I just heard you saying, we could do it sooner than that. Is that what I just heard you say?
I need to look at reserves and confirm, but I believe there should be reserves to do so.
Potentially. Okay.
I just didn't have time to get all that put together.
No, and you're fine.
I'll just chime in a little bit here. There's a few things that we may be able to do this year, but Dan still has a very full plate. And I would love to give him some time to finish a couple of these projects. I mean, he's been down in Downey every day, he's spent numerous hours. And poor guy's gonna have to have some vacation and some time off. And so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on some of these things without him having the time and a direct conversation with him about his timeline. I don't know if you had that conversation, I haven't yet. And
He expressed a similar thing, which again, I go back to direction, and then the direction is, do we want to wait and have Dan do it in-house, or do we want to, as Hal suggested, have a contractor do it and have a contractor driven?
And even having a contractor do it, every one of these projects we've had contractors on, and it consumes a lot of Dan's time.
True.
I could see us getting the storage area on the top bank and stuff done That to me is a fairly simple deal, but when it comes to construction, anything construction, I want Dan to have some time to look it over, because every one of these projects, I've met with him numerous times. There's change orders, there's everything else that goes on, and so that's my concern.
We're also gonna need some time for Shannon to go through procurement on these too, right?
Right, depending on how, if there was phases or anything like that, yes. I pulled a couple of numbers of stuff that we had done in the past. The stick build and the pre-engineered were about the same as far as procurement goes. About 6 weeks to get it done, about 2 weeks to contract. So not too much, but yes, definitely some lead time on that too.
Okay.
I'm curious, because I missed, and I don't know if it's been talked about. If we were to do it in phases, like we've talked about in the past, has anyone given any thought to the priorities of what would be first, second, third?
I'll let Hal speak to that. He did a little bit last week we were talking, so Hal?
And then while you're at that, Hal, my next question would be, if we were to kick it down the road to give Dan some time so that he could kind of oversee it, what do you think the general contractor price difference would be? What are we going to get charged? I'm curious. Just a ballpark.
Well, I used the two numbers from the project that Dan did, and then also YDC.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
YDC came in basically at $360 a square foot, and $120 of that $360 just goes to stuff that doesn't involve actual construction materials and processes. So
Significant.
I wouldn't say, yeah, it is significant. So that's why those numbers are the way that they are. First process would be that we would go through, pardon my language, quick design of storage structure. It's three-sided, wrinkle tin building, pre-engineered, get it out to pre-engineered, get it up on the upper tier, get that replacement. Once that is taken care of with Road and Bridge, we take down all of the storage structure along South Fifth to accommodate the construction for the addition to the west side of Road and Bridge, leaving the one bay that Tory keeps his trailer and truck in and his office in place, and leaving us in place, starting construction as quick as we could with drawings, etc., for Tory to get him in the northeast corner. So that's basically phase one. Storage structure on the upper tier, and tear down along Fifth, and then put Tory in the corner, and then be prepared potentially in the spring to start, if not sooner, the addition for Road and Bridge and Planning and Development.
And let me ask, if we were to be able to, and how does this factor, if we lived in the corner and was all the way out of there, would that help with demolition?
No,
That's going to be the same,
it's going to be the same. Yeah.
because they're leaving that one piece rather than taking it, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't affect us, Tory,
Okay.
with any of the long-term
Perfect.
overall plan.
Okay. Ken, you have thoughts?
Well, two or three of them. And then I had a great meeting with Dan, and Dan is overwhelmed. All the projects are good, and they always seem to take about a third longer than what you think anyway. And there's always maintenance, and he is also responsible for all the general upkeep that we have around here too. We can't ignore that Dan doesn't just get to go stand and watch new construction all the time. And so I'm worried about the time frame, number one. And I guess my question of it is our hair on fire? You know, that we just have to do something in haste, or can we look back and go, is this the best alternative or whatever? I don't have a problem with the design and the movement. I just worry that this might be a 3 to 5 year project. I guess one of my issues is, and I'll just go ahead and bring it up, in meeting with a good chunk of the departments all over the county, one of the main concern with every department is, of course, compensation. And I know you guys are working on that, and that's another discussion or whatever, but I always worry that our greatest asset in the county is our employees. And we've got to make sure, we may have the best buildings in the county, and if we don't have good employees to fill them, we're missing the boat. So
I'm kind of looking at maybe some of the reserves, possibly, do we need to do something different with that or extend it farther out? Rather than put all of our reserves into buildings, is there something else we need to do to, raise the ship up to the entire county? So those are some of my issues, and I guess that's my question of it is, I don't have a problem moving ahead with those things that we have to do, to accommodate what we need to do, but in talking with Kyle and talking with Dan, I like the steady as you go approach, and the biggest problem Dan has, he said, you build these metal buildings and you have to go in there and reframe them all over again on the inside. It's double the cost. So a metal building it goes up fast, but then you have to go stud them, you have to insulate it. Sometimes you're better off to go ahead to a basically stick built. So I'd like to at least make sure we're looking at that and saying, in the long run, if we're using Dan, do we need to extend that out and do it the way we're doing it comfortably and whatever? Those are my same thing as timeline, costs, and again, priorities. And I think everybody's kind of idea. I've talked with Kyle about his shop. We got to have, a new roof on yours this year?
Yeah.
Automatic, so that's part of a project. There may be a couple other things you need to do. So I'm worried about Dan, worried about whether we can do it in 2 years, whether it should realistically look at 3, maybe 4. Unless our house is on fire, those are my concerns that I have on there. So I'm not sure and Dan told me, he said, I'm worried that these things, we have these costs, you could almost add a third to that. He said, it just seems to always come in that much higher, which is going to affect reserves, it's going to affect everything else there.
And again, like I said at the beginning, those costs are just a placeholder for our discussion today, so we can kind of lay out a potential timeline and things, and I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on the reserves. I don't want to use reserves for payroll. That's not a good
We would never.
there.
Well, but I'm just saying, we got to be real careful. The reserves are there for a reason. Is this the reason?
And that's,
So, I don't know.
That's the basis of the discussion today.
Yep,
And
so
once I can get your reserve numbers, that will help.
if we can do that.
With your decision,
Yeah.
because if we've got, depending on what those numbers look like.
And I wanted to have this discussion today because it did have budget implications.
Yes.
And it does, before anybody went and spent any more time on this, make sure everybody's unified in a direction so we can go through methodically and make the best decision, timeline, budget-wise, and all of that. And I appreciate Hal has put a lot of effort into it. And all of you have it up to this point in time, but now it's time to, let's be strategic in our thinking and where we're going. So I appreciate those concerns very much. So,
Well, there's a lot of things on this that we've talked about in budget, like the wash station and all kinds of stuff that we've kind of pushed back a few times that we've talked about doing. So I think that this is a good look down the future. And like we said last time, it's just going to take care of 5 to 10 years worth of requests coming up so that we are covering our bases there. But in the timeline, I would say that the only thing that would get done before spring of next year would probably be the storage unit upstairs. Just to give Dan time to get through this year he, in his report to us this morning, he's had to shut down the chambers because he doesn't have the manpower right now, and that's a project that's in the middle and sitting there idle because he is pushed. He's trying to get everything ready for the fair. And that's the 1st of August. So he's booked. And then the timeline up here at the school.
well,
Well, and on top of that, where are we on the timeline of the new gate or the new scale going? And that's all pieces of this too, because if we talk about getting the road, the weed and the bug folks, consolidated in that, so we've got to step back and look at, I assume we're in the process of putting a new scale house in, or whatever that is, so that's all.
It was on our paper this morning.
So that's on our plate.
$26,000.
And so I want to finish something. Thank goodness we get to go through a door now. But it would be nice to finish a few things. We went out to the jail and saw work in progress out there. It's like changing spark plugs on a pickup going down the road, driving it. And I appreciate Dan for what he's doing, and Shanda with all the procurement, so I think taking a step, taking it back and taking a deep breath, keep working at it, but I don't know, I can't see the urgency of getting something done right now,
When
so.
I talked to Dylan, he thought that scale house would be done in October.
And that's gonna be this year kind of thing.
Yeah,
So-
that's an outside contractor doing all of that.
Okay,
Mhm.
but it does involve
Talking
still,
about the whole project,
yeah,
the whole design.
we're looking at the apartments out there and, and everything else, and if we are gonna move them over there, and so.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we're at with, I guess if you're asking what rush we have, and, that's one of the things I have is I think sooner than later, I wanna get them folks down so we can have our stuff help better utilize the public coming through us when they're gone, because they're out in the field all day long, but then the public's trying to call them on their phone while they're spraying, and want to try to get a little bit better closeness there.
Al, did you have something?
A couple of items from previous conversations, and this is my interpretation, that there was a sense of urgency because of previous budget that had been allocated to get Tory moving forward.
Right.
If there is a sense of urgency on anything in this, and my impression is that Tory was the first priority. If we were to be able to move that forward, we could leave everything in place until spring and move the storage up above. For us, there's not an urgency, but there is a need to have the public hearing room. When that comes, that comes. So that's my interpretation of our conversations and what led to this solution,
Correct.
timeframe and staging.
Correct.
So I would
What
leave that to Tory to address what he feel his needs are, and that sense of urgency to get him started, so.
Yeah.
Like a normal, I haven't been involved with the buildings that have been going up, but normally you're getting like a design plan. I mean, could a next step be a design plan for the two buildings and looking at moving the storage stuff up above? Because like you say, with timing and stuff like that, it's gonna take a little time just to get the design plans for these two other buildings.
Correct. Tori?
I think for me, with respect to Dan and his schedule, I think that originally we looked at being able to do the shell and then finish out the garage portion, and then we would work out of the office that we're in until we could find the time to get in there and do the office side of it. Doing that would allow me, finishing out the garage portion, we'd have shore power. That would fix our morgue issue of only being able to use during the warm months. That'd be done so that we could utilize that. That would give us the ability to do everything. We could do our inspections, we can have our own morgue facilitation there in the meantime, in the interim, and then, they can finish up the office side as they can or whatever, right? It's not as big of a priority, but if we can at least kind of meet halfway and get that portion done, that helps me out tremendously, because it gives us the ability to actually do everything that we're supposed to do without having to use everybody else to get it done.
That said, relative to Tory's current budget, what he has available, he's probably, by the time you get design services taken care of, get the building put together, permits, etc., he's probably, to start this year, to get the shell put together so that he could use the garage side, and then stage to, he's probably $100,000 shy to get that done. So in our conversations, he was anticipating to ask for budget this next cycle, potentially carrying the 300,000 over, so that come next budget cycle, October 1, he would have sufficient money to just go ahead and get that started and get going. He has the money to start the design, but he would probably end up being short on the construction end.
Could you and Shanda speak to Carl's point about time frame for doing the design and going through the procurement process? Is that a 90-day process, more than that? So again, as we try to map things out.
On the storage facility above, on the upper tier for Kyle, That's a simple layout and send it to the steel building people. They then do the design, knowing what you're anticipating to build. Plug it into their computer, send it to their respective engineers for structural, and procurement does their thing. I don't know how long Shanda takes for
It would be more
procurement.
for the buildings, the two.
So the same would run parallel, but it would be more design time on Tori's end, and then if we chose to do a pre-engineered steel building, that's part of the reason why the pre-engineered steel building was chosen for Tori, was because it could be enclosed, and then at such time that it could go in and be finished out on the interior side. So that would take, I don't know, probably 8 to 10 weeks before it was ready for Shanda to then upload it and see what kind of pricing it would take on the steel building people. So
So I did a little bit of background just because we have construction ones going on now, right? The one, the steel building in Downing for the exhibit hall, and then the YDC were my two comparisons. They are in different scope to these projects that we have, but just for something to kind of wrap your mind around. So the exhibit hall is the metal, pre-engineered metal building, right? So then we go out to bid for that, and then they engineer the project, where YDC, right, we engineer the project and then we go out to bid. So we have to do both of those parts. They're just which comes first. The interesting thing of both of those, between the date we contracted on each of those projects to the date we anticipate having a certificate of occupancy, there's 10 months for the exhibit hall, and there's 11 months for YDC. So there wasn't a huge difference, because as I believe it was Commissioner Bullock mentioned, kind of once you've got that frame to then build walls on the inside, that does seem to kind of vet out in what we anticipate when we started with Teton West to break ground, which was great. And that project has really moved pretty smooth to the last little bit. But when we are going to occupy it, August 1st is going to be 10 months, and YDC is going to take one more beyond that. So there's not, at least those two projects haven't vetted out the speed to which we could get in there. And I am fairly certain we could get like a certificate of occupancy for the garage where the other half wasn't done. So we could run those separate. But another lesson we've kind of learned in a lot of these projects is when we start and stop, man, it is difficult to line up the glass and the framing and all of those other pieces back and get everybody back on board. If we can start and move, it goes so much smoother than when we do it out of order. But it's not impossible. It's just the last projects have been a little more clunky.
Another concern I have is winter. Both these projects, we've had some
Winter
extra
conditions and-
expenses because of that. I mean, we just opened this door up out here, and we had concrete that cracked and all kinds of stuff that kind of put us 2 months behind an opening out here. I mean, part of it was the metal detectors and stuff, but still, we had projects that had to wait for spring to come back out so that they could tear that concrete out and re-pour it. So I think that in these conversations, we need to see where we're at for winter. I think that construction in Idaho, winter's a really tough time to be doing that.
So, Al, since you're kind of the semi-expert in the area, when would you think would be a good time, given all the information we've talked about now, to, let's just say, break ground or begin the process and give Dan time to finish what he's doing, which potentially is October for YDC?
Right, that's the middle to end of October is the current date.
Okay, so given that,
Start design process on both buildings. Early start for Tori would be basically first week of October to start construction. And then not until spring relative to the storage on the upper tier and the addition for Road and Bridge.
okay. Kyle, what does that sound like to you?
I think you should be working on designs and give yourself some time through the winter and start construction in the spring. The buildings up on the second level, that won't matter if it's spring, winter, whatever. You're not dealing with concrete flooring and all of that. I would move forward with that in the fall.
Okay. Dory, is that kind of a time frame you can live with?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think rough guesstimation, if we can actually start in October, we should have plenty of time to at least get the foundation poured and the shell up. And if we can get into the garage side, that solves our problem because it gets us through the winter. And that was the big issue, is if we can get that shore power in there, we can get the trailer in there where it's accessible, then we're fine. We can do everything out of that operationally that we need to out of the garage side. And then Dan can take his time as far as when he can get to the interior portion. I think I'm completely fine with that.
Christie, from the financial side, do you see any issues with traveling in that direction?
I'll just verify that we've got the reserves, and then we'll just anticipate, as we go through the budget process, we can maybe fine tune some numbers and see if we need to add contingency or whatever, and then just put it in the budget accordingly. It'll just have to be where we put it, so that it's kind of on its own, but it'll be, will be general fund.
Right. Okay. Jason, any thoughts?
So, can I jump, so we have some money now set up for this that we could start the design process
So we have
and put it into
300,000
this current year, right?
We have 300,000 in
So we
Tori's
could,
budget.
we could do all the design work and do everything we could now.
We could
Tori's project.
begin Tori's
Right,
design.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That
Yeah.
particular
Yeah.
point, I think we've all agreed that that's the
Starting
next
point.
logical step, but we don't want to wait till October to start design. We could do it now if we have the funds,
Yeah.
to at least go as far as we can with the design now, and then budget the next year, if we start in October and get that, or if we have an early winter, it might be April.
Now, we also have money budgeted for Road and Bridge's roof.
Okay, that's what I understood,
It
so.
would be, I don't know, it would be possible to get that started and get that done this year,
It does need to be done.
I think
yes.
so.
I
and
think-
it won't affect the,
No,
okay.
and
So if we
Kicking-
could get that started, that uses that money that's already there. We can get Tori's design started, that'll use a portion of that, and whatever we don't think we're gonna need, we can roll forward with the rest of the project costs.
We can budget the leftover into next year, which
Yeah.
the timing's gonna be what it is. But
Yeah.
I don't think we need to even, I don't think we can anticipate much until we get October to start turning any dirt up there much.
Which I think it's still gonna be, Idaho, I think it's still gonna be warm enough that we're not really gonna be pushing snow. I think they should have enough time to at least get that shell up, and then the rest of it, snow's not gonna affect it because it's all on the inside.
Sorry,
And-
guys.
Very good, Jason, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I just think going through, like Ken said, and the priorities, and as we go through the budget process, just fine tuning the numbers a little bit and making sure that it's something that we want to follow through with, and at what pace.
Okay. Ernie?
The only item that I have before you go, Commissioner Moser, is that the balance of Tories, I want to make sure that it's clear on our end relative to numbers with the remainder of what is needed for Tory be something that he needs to work into his
Yes.
next year budget.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure
And
that
I
I
think-
was clear on where I go with some of my others.
Essentially, that was my plan, is I haven't turned it in yet because I wanted to wait for this meeting to make sure that that's the direction, but that's the anticipation, is that we'll budget for the project, and then with the rollover, and then we'll just document that in our requests, that we'll use everything that we can as far as how we've spoken in regards to the engineering and all that. Whatever's left over, we'll roll it in and then subtract from or add to for the remainder.
And hopefully find the funds to finish funding that right out, because that is, my assuming that's gonna be priority one, to do that, and then moving the new shed, the storage up on the upper tier, almost the second priority. That's where you've gotta go,
Yes.
and then the rest of it will fall in line.
Both of them could conceivably occur in
Yep.
October, start in October.
Okay.
Uh,
Ernie?
And I like what we're doing, but I still need to talk to Dan and just
Yeah.
get his stamp of approval myself.
Okay.
That's,
So to summarize what we've talked about then, we're green lighting the roof to use this year's funds that are projected to get that started. We're green lighting Tory to start his design, work on that. We're We're gonna check and see what our reserve numbers are to, again, kind of finalize where the money's coming from and budget years and all of that. And then we're tentatively looking for Torrey to start his build in October, and tentatively looking at road and bridge planning development starting in the spring sometime. Is that what everybody heard?
Pending Dan's schedule.
Yeah, I was gonna put pending Dad's blessing, but,
That's- I think that's a good plan.
okay. Okay, so we have a direction.
I don't know if you guys have been down to Downey.
It's amazing.
I looked at that facility. But Larry, you've been in there and looked? It's pretty amazing. And Dan, like I said, he doesn't have a spare second.
Yeah.
And I think he's doing it right.
Mhm.
I
So
don't
he-
want,
he does everything right.
I don't want to cut corners. Everywhere I've been, I've seen his work. And we have a great asset there.
And that's the reason
We want to burn him out.
I just want to talk to him, say, okay, this is where we're going.
So, just as a stopgap, I'm just trying to think, if the reserve numbers don't look like we've kind of talked about today, do we need to come back and maybe revise some things or look at something different?
I can work on reserve numbers next week. I've got budget levy Monday, Tuesday, but
Mhm.
I can try and work on them later in the week. And then do you want me to update?
I was thinking maybe
Which
that,
week are you guys
maybe that
gone?
week after we get back, because we're gone the week of the 18th.
Then I'll do an
If,
update.
if there's a red flag, then we can reconvene and
Okay.
make a difference, but if everything looks okay, then we'll just proceed as we've kind of talked about. Does that sound all right?
Be good.
Okay.
I think, just really quickly, to say, when people watch this meeting, just so that they know, that this project, as we're discussing, is not raising taxes. It is not increasing the ask amount for taxes at all. This is all going to, with however we proceed, this is very preliminary. But as we move forward, this is not an ask on the taxpayer for an increase.
Correct.
This project is not. So we'll prioritize and we'll look at what needs to happen, when, and be very mindful. And it's not going to move forward if it's a tax increase, is what I would say. This is going to be using reserves, and we'll budget accordingly so that we can do it without raising taxes.
Fair enough.
That's my opinion.
And I think that's.
I think that, but I just wanted to be clear, because I think that that's the direction that we're all going. I just want to make sure that it's clear that, for people, if they're curious about it, that it's not.
And while it's new buildings, it's going to be replacing existing buildings, and then those will be torn down, if I understand correctly. So Road and Bridge will still have maintenance and utility costs. And these guys already have existing costs in that area that will just be transferred to one building instead of multiple.
And even with like down with the cleaning of the buildings and stuff, I see they're cleaning the windows and stuff. We're kind of keeping the same amount. We're not adding more buildings for them. We're just moving how they are set up. So that will kind of help them. Then they'll be new, but you're not adding there, but then utilizing everybody working on it in the county like that with Dan and all of us and the work that Hal's put in, you could make it real easy and just bid it out, but we're trying to save money doing what we're doing.
Agreed. And again, that's why we talked originally about doing this as a 3-year project, to spread it out over multiple budget years and not have a tax increase implication. So I appreciate everybody's time and energy and efforts today, and